welcome back to our channel. One of these pennies sold for over $100,000. Check your stash, you might be sitting on gold. In 1972, a year already colored by deep political currents, the roar of the Vietnam War, and a heated presidential election, something small and seemingly insignificant was struck into history, again and again, by the dies of the United States Mint. The Lincoln cent, a copper composition coin familiar to millions, carried with it the simple, trusted image of President Abraham Lincoln on its obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on its reverse. It was minted in the billions, scattered across grocery store counters, candy machines, and bus fare boxes. No one could have predicted that buried within the mountain of pennies that year, a tiny mistake would defy time and routine, quietly waiting to be discovered. The Philadelphia Mint was responsible for churning out vast quantities of the 1-cent piece in 1972, a year in which over 2.9 billion pennies were pressed into circulation. The process was mechanical, systematic, and designed for precision. But mechanical precision, as history often teaches us, is vulnerable to the most unexpected inconsistencies. Somewhere in that sea of coins, a few pieces were struck with something unusual. Unnoticeable at first. A shimmer, perhaps. A doubling of letters that danced slightly off their axis. They were released unknowingly, flowing into the economy with no warning label, no sign that they were different, just a whisper of something not quite right. Years passed, and millions of hands exchanged these pennies without a second glance. The anomaly remained hidden, camouflaged among the familiar. Until one late afternoon, deep in the suburbs of Wisconsin, a collector named Harris Bledsoe was sifting through a pile of change that had accumulated in a ceramic jar on the top of his dresser. Harris was no amateur. He had been fascinated with coins since childhood, particularly the subtle quirks that often meant far more than what met the eye. This habit of combing through coinage was therapeutic to him, a meditative ritual. But this day would prove anything but ordinary. As he lifted a worn 1972 Lincoln cent into the light, he froze. His eye caught something off. The word "Liberty" looked thicker, bolder, almost as if it were vibrating under the lamp's glow. He rubbed it between his fingers and examined it again. Then the date, 1972, appeared strange, as if its edges were slightly blurred by a double image. His pulse quickened. Harris reached for his magnifier and peered closely. He saw it clearly now. A complete doubling of the entire obverse legend, "In God We Trust, Liberty," and the date. Not a faint ghosting or mechanical illusion. A strong, clear, unmistakable doubling. He sat back slowly. His breath caught in his chest. Harris knew this wasn't common. He had seen minor doubling before, machine doubling, a byproduct of a loose die or weak strike. But this was different. It had character. Intentionality. It was as though two impressions had been stamped slightly apart, creating a mirror of error layered onto one another. He turned to his books, cross-referencing known varieties. When he matched the characteristics to what numismatists had labeled as the 1972 double die obverse, specifically the Type 1 variety, his hands trembled. Fewer than 20,000 of these errors were estimated to exist. Compared to the billions of standard 1972 cents, the ratio was astonishingly small. What Harris held in his palm was not a simple penny anymore. It was a rarity that had silently survived decades, passed through hundreds of transactions, and defied the odds by arriving in his possession. The magnitude of that struck him slowly, like a growing crescendo of realization. He stared at the coin, contemplating the path it might have traveled, the jacket pockets, the cash drawers, the floors of cars, the hands of children buying bubblegum, until it found rest in his change jar. The discovery began to shift his world. Coin collectors and enthusiasts, once merely acquaintances, now reached out to him for details, photographs, verification. A few months later, Harris saw another one listed at auction. It fetched several $100s. Then another. The prices rose, almost erratically. Some sold for a few hundred, others crossed into the $1,000 range. But they were dependent on one crucial factor: condition. The higher the grade, the more astronomical the leap in value. A coin graded mint state 65 or above could draw offers beyond expectations. Harris sent his own in for grading. Weeks of agonized waiting followed, and then the envelope arrived. Ms. 66. He whispered the grade to himself with disbelief. A near-perfect specimen. Suddenly, he was a man holding a coin worth more than 2 months of his mortgage. And the strange thing was, it didn't feel like money in his hand. It felt like a relic. A whisper from a machine that had faltered only once, and in that moment of imperfection, it created something unforgettable. As news of the 1972 double-die penny spread further, more people began searching their change. Stories emerged across the country, school teachers finding them in lunch money, retirees uncovering them in their decades-old collections, and even a child who unknowingly spent one on a school vending machine. The 1972 DDO was no longer just an error, it became a symbol of hidden treasure, of overlooked value lying in plain sight, but with rising awareness came complications. Fakes emerged. Machine doubling was misidentified. Some hopeful owners sent in their coins only to receive disappointing results. Experts emphasized key identifying markers: the crisp, pronounced doubling visible to the naked eye, the absence of doubling on the reverse, and the strength of the strike. The collector community grew more vigilant, more precise. Authentication became crucial. Amid this flurry, something strange began to happen. A second variety, one lesser known, surfaced. Dubbed unofficially as Type 2, it had more subtle doubling, primarily on the date. Some debated its legitimacy. Was it a true double die or merely a clever illusion? A few experts insisted it was real, though less dramatic than the Type 1. The community buzzed with speculation. The existence of multiple error types only deepened the intrigue. Even seasoned collectors admitted the lines between authentic doubling and illusion could blur, making the hunt more difficult, more demanding, and somehow, more thrilling. The market reacted in waves. Type 1 coins in mint state condition began fetching tens of thousands of dollars in high-profile auctions. One coin, pristine and unblemished, crossed the $20,000 mark at a Florida auction house. The crowd had gasped when the final hammer fell. What once clinked in soda machines now commanded the attention of elite collectors and investors. The penny had transformed, no longer a utility but a legend, but just when the 1972 double die seemed fully documented and understood, a twist unraveled the narrative. A collector in Ohio reported a 1972 cent that appeared to have doubling on both the obverse and reverse. Experts were skeptical at first. Reverse doubling was almost unheard of for this variety. But the photos suggested something else entirely: a die clash. The coin bore ghost-like impressions of elements from both dies. Not just doubling, but traces of Lincoln's bust overlapping faintly onto the memorial. It didn't match any known mint error. Numismatists scratched their heads. Could this have been a rogue die clash that occurred during the same production era? Or was it a previously undocumented variety, a result of misaligned maintenance procedures at the mint? The coin was submitted to multiple grading services. Each confirmed it was genuine, but none could assign it a traditional classification. It stood alone, an outlier even among outliers. Suddenly, the 1972 cent wasn't just known for the famous double die. Now it had a mystery sibling, one that challenged assumptions and rekindled excitement among even the most seasoned experts. As whispers of the Ohio clash coin spread, attention once again surged. Collectors went back to their binders and folders, scanning their 1972s not just for doubling, but for anything out of place. What began as a well-documented error had now expanded into a web of variations, some yet unnamed, some still disputed. The simple penny had become a realm of possibility. The psychological pull of the coin lay in its accessibility. It wasn't gold or silver. It wasn't a rare foreign issue with inscriptions in ancient languages. It was a penny. Something any American might find rattling in their pocket or hiding in an old shoebox. The romance of it, the chance to uncover value from the mundane, gave the 1972 double die penny a mythic quality. Like a modern-day alchemy, it turned copper into gold, not by transformation, but by perception. Harris Bledsoe eventually sold his coin. It was a reluctant decision, born of necessity. But he never stopped collecting. And even after the coin left his hands, he felt its story linger. He followed its journey in the news, in forums, in auction catalogs. He watched as the legend of the 1972 era grew, not just in financial terms, but in reverence. What had once been just a coin became a cultural artifact, proof that even the smallest items, when flawed in just the right way, could rewrite their fate entirely. To this day, the 1972 double-die penny remains a reminder that the extraordinary often hides in plain sight. That value is not always about metal content or denomination. Sometimes, it's about the rare dance of error and timing. The kind that only a handful of machines, operating under the chaotic rhythm of time and pressure, could create once, and never again. In the final decade of the 20th century, as the world stood on the brink of technological change and economic transformation, the United States Mint continued its steady, almost unnoticed rhythm. Among the billions of coins it produced in 1995, a particular kind of penny began its life like any other, copper-plated zinc, weighing just 2.5 grams, with the solemn profile of Abraham Lincoln looking leftward, etched into its obverse. It was small, ordinary, and abundant. Over 6 billion of these cents were produced by the Philadelphia Mint alone that year, each one meant to be identical to the next. But somewhere within the precision and predictability of the minting process, a subtle fracture of perfection slipped through. A mistake was born. And that mistake, like a whispered secret, would alter the course of numismatic history. The error wasn't obvious to the average eye. In fact, the majority of Americans who handled the 1995 penny never noticed anything out of the ordinary. These coins paid for coffee, bus rides, and newspapers, passed through registers and tip jars, and collected dust in drawers and piggy banks. But hidden in the vastness of that sea of coinage was a rare anomaly, one that collectors would come to revere, and that only the most patient, most meticulous observers would ever truly see. Far from the bustling noise of major coin shows and online bidding platforms, a quiet collector named Lorraine Carter lived in the small town of Helena, Montana. Lorraine had a deep affection for Lincoln cents, particularly those struck in the later decades of the 20th century. She often joked that her greatest discoveries didn't come from coin shops or estate sales, but from change received at the local pharmacy or corner diner. She wasn't chasing gold eagles or silver dollars. Her treasures were smaller, humbler. But on a cold January evening in 2002, her casual sorting ritual revealed something startling. Lorraine picked up a 1995 penny that looked slightly off. The date appeared doubled. Not smeared or blurry, but distinctly layered. The letters in Liberty seemed thicker than usual, and under her magnifier, she could see that each character bore a shadow, a second, offset imprint. The phrase, "In God We Trust," bore the same peculiar characteristic, and the numerals in 1995 carried an almost ghost-like echo. Her heart raced. It wasn't the first time she had seen minor doubling on a coin, but this one felt different. Stronger. More deliberate. She dug through her collection, comparing it to other 1995 cents she had saved. None matched. The doubling wasn't random or faint, it was pronounced and clear. Lorraine knew better than to jump to conclusions. She reached out to a local coin expert, and after an initial inspection, he confirmed her suspicion. It was one of the rare double-die varieties of 1995, a known but elusive error, long rumored and rarely seen. Unlike earlier double-die errors such as the famed 1955 or 1972 Lincoln cents, the 1995 double-die obverse was more refined in its appearance. It wasn't as dramatic, but it was significant. Only a small fraction of the year's mintage displayed this doubling. How it occurred was no mystery. During the hubbing process, where the die is impressed with the coin's design, a misalignment had caused a second impression slightly offset from the first. This produced a doubling effect on the die, which was then transferred to every coin it struck until it was corrected or retired. Lorraine's coin, confirmed authentic and graded MS-67, would become the crown jewel of her modest collection. She didn't sell it. Not at first. Instead, she shared it at local exhibitions and coin club meetings, watching as fellow enthusiasts gathered around with magnifiers and curiosity, marveling at the quiet brilliance of a penny that looked like so many others, until it didn't. News of the 1995 double die slowly began to spread. Forums lit up with discussions, coin dealers started offering premiums for verified examples, and grading services began cataloging the coin with special attention. As awareness grew, so did value. In the early 2000s, examples sold for a few $100s. Then, as collector demand grew and surviving high-grade specimens became scarcer, the price began to climb. Coins graded MS-65 and above began fetching over $1,000. By the end of the decade, those in pristine condition were climbing toward 5 figures, but not all coins labeled as double dies were genuine. With the increased attention came a flood of misidentified or falsely claimed examples. Machine doubling, an entirely different phenomenon, confused new collectors. Machine doubling creates a flat, shelf-like appearance, whereas true double dies show raised, rounded duplication with clear separation between the two impressions. The key difference, subtle yet essential, became the litmus test for true discovery. Then came the twist no one anticipated. In 2013, a collector from San Diego named Brent Holloway submitted a batch of coins for grading, including a 1995 double die he had pulled from circulation years earlier. When the coin was returned, it came with an unexpected note: possible discovery of a previously unknown variation. Further investigation revealed that while the coin bore the classic doubling of Liberty and In God We Trust, it also displayed a unique die gouge below the bust, near the truncation line, an imperfection caused by a stray mark on the die itself. The gouge had not been documented on any other 1995 DDO examples. Grading services and researchers scrambled to compare other known specimens. None had it. Speculation exploded. Was this a unique coin struck from a transitional or experimental die? Had a mint employee unknowingly introduced a one-of-a-kind variation? Some theorized that it could have been the result of die polishing or a late-stage die deterioration anomaly. Whatever the cause, it became known in collector circles as the Holloway gouge variety, a single known coin, now worth significantly more than its already rare peers, and a reminder that even within errors, mysteries can deepen. The evolution of the 1995 double die's value was no longer linear. High-grade examples began commanding serious attention. A flawless MS-68 sold at auction for over $40,000, while another with exceptional luster and eye appeal reached $67,000. As of recent records, the highest auction prices for top-tier 1995 double dies have touched the upper limit of $128,000, especially those with impeccable condition and strong doubling. These were no longer just pennies. They were artifacts of accident, framed in rarity and polished by time. And yet, what makes the 1995 double die so fascinating isn't only the value or the scarcity, it's the subtlety. It doesn't announce itself with glaring errors or dramatic deformations. It whispers its uniqueness. You have to look. You have to notice. And for many collectors, that is the real magic. It rewards curiosity, patience, and a deep appreciation for the intricate dance of process and imperfection that defines minting. Even now, decades later, coins still turn up. A cashier's drawer. A flea market box. A forgotten piggy bank in a grandmother's attic. Every now and then, someone finds it. That slight shimmer, that extra shadow behind the letters. And in that instant, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. For just a moment, history, art, and chance align, and when that penny reveals itself, its true value comes into focus, not just in monetary terms, but in the story it tells. A coin minted in haste, passed in silence, and discovered in wonder. A copper-plated coin born from a fleeting misalignment, now worth between $40,000 and $128,000 depending on its grade and clarity. A reminder that even the smallest pieces of metal can carry the weight of awe, if you're willing to look closely enough. The year 2012 moved with the hum of digital acceleration, as smartphones grew smarter and headlines streamed endlessly in the palms of people's hands. Amidst the rapid evolution of technology, another quiet revolution took place, this one so small, so unassuming, that most Americans carried it in their pockets without ever noticing. The 2012 Lincoln cent, a coin not of silver or gold, but copper-plated zinc, continued a long and storied legacy. Since 2010, the U.S. Mint had been producing the Union Shield reverse design, symbolizing Lincoln's role in preserving the United States. It was modern, clean, and sleek, a break from the architectural dignity of the Lincoln Memorial reverse used for decades. Over 5 billion pennies were minted that year between the Philadelphia and Denver facilities. They were meant to be uniform. But uniformity has never been a guarantee when mechanics meet mass production. That year, something unusual happened. The machines were functioning within tolerance, the dies prepared and mounted, but even the most precise systems can falter for a heartbeat. During one of those split-second lapses, a small batch of 2012 pennies emerged with features that didn't quite match their billions of siblings. A collector flipping through pocket change might have dismissed them. They looked normal, almost. But subtle signs told another story, one that would take time and patience to uncover. Somewhere in central Missouri, a young coin enthusiast named Calvin Moore, only 25 at the time, had just started to take collecting more seriously. What began as a childhood hobby inspired by his grandfather had now evolved into a deep curiosity. He had recently returned home from college, burdened by student loans but rich in time and drive. His favorite ritual each weekend was combing through rolls of coins from the local bank, hunting for wheat cents, older nickels, and the occasional silver dime. Most rolls offered nothing more than repetition. But in one specific roll, something caught his attention, a 2012 penny with lettering that seemed a little off. At first, Calvin thought he was imagining things. But the word "Liberty" looked thicker than usual. Under the right light, the date 2012 seemed to shimmer in a doubled outline, especially on the 2 and the 0. He placed the coin aside and moved on, only to find another with similar characteristics 3 rolls later. His instinct twitched. He pulled out his digital microscope and examined both coins side by side with others from the same year. The difference was undeniable. Doubling. Not weak, not illusionary, but raised, rounded doubling that hugged the contours of the letters. He posted images in a small online coin forum. The responses varied. Some claimed machine doubling, others dismissed it as glare. But one user, a seasoned numismatist with decades of experience, responded with 3 words: "That's not normal." Calvin sent one of the coins to a grading service. The wait stretched across weeks. He tried not to think about it. But when the results returned, they came with both validation and surprise. Not only was the doubling genuine, it was categorized as a new listing, an official double die obverse for the 2012 cent. This wasn't just an unusual coin. It was a discovery. Suddenly, what had felt like a quiet weekend hobby exploded into a storm of attention. Calvin's images were shared in newsletters, blogs, and collector groups. Others began searching their change. A few more examples surfaced, always rare, always with sharp doubling on "Liberty," "In God We Trust," and the date. Unlike more dramatic errors from the 1950s or 1970s, this one carried a different kind of intrigue. It was modern. Unexpected. A reminder that even in the age of automation, errors could still slip through. As more specimens were authenticated, the coin market began to take notice. Prices for confirmed examples quickly reached several $100s. Within a year, that number climbed into the low thousands, especially for coins graded mint state 65 and above. One pristine MS-67 specimen sold privately for just under $15,000, setting a new standard for modern-era coins. Dealers who had once dismissed post-2010 cents began looking twice, and then came a twist that no one expected. At a regional coin show in Oregon, a dealer showcased a 2012 double die cent with unusually strong die polishing lines, a feature that typically results from maintenance of the die surface to extend its life. The oddity? The lines ran across the shield on the reverse in a crisscrossed pattern, and the coin still bore full doubling on the obverse. A die clash? Perhaps. Or could it have been an early-stage die deterioration? The numismatic community began calling this the crossed shield variant, and while only 3 were confirmed over the next few years, it created a new sub-narrative within the already rare 2012 DDO coins. Those with both doubling and reverse abrasions now carried a new layer of mystery. Were they transitional strikes from a faulty die? Could they signal an undocumented adjustment during minting? No one had definitive answers. But the suspense only added to the allure. The search continued. Collectors poured through bank rolls. Some scoured eBay listings for underpriced errors. Others revisited their long-forgotten 2012 pocket change. And through it all, the legend of the double die 2012 cent grew, whispered among collectors, discussed in video forums, and presented at seminars by experts who marveled at its subtleties. By 2020, the coin's value had jumped significantly. High-grade examples, especially those in MS-67 or MS-68, began selling at national auctions for amounts most would never associate with a 1-cent coin. The average collector was stunned. A coin still young enough to be in circulation, still occasionally found in cash drawers and Coinstar machines, was now commanding 5 figures. Prices fluctuated with demand, condition, and provenance, but one thing remained constant: every authentic 2012 double die obverse cent was treated like a miniature treasure. And the numbers? The confirmed value range for these rare examples rests today between $24,000 and $82,000, depending on grade, strike clarity, and die state. Coins with the sharper doubling and minimal contact marks reside on the higher end, especially those certified by top-tier grading agencies. Yet, beyond the numbers, beyond the escalating figures and auction catalog listings, there remains something purer. The 2012 double die penny is a reminder that even in the most ordinary moments, in the clink of change at a gas station or the slow unraveling of a coin roll on a rainy afternoon, there lies the potential for discovery. For awe. For the extraordinary to emerge from the smallest space imaginable, all it takes is someone to notice.